Hi, it's Kristen, and we are doing another book scavenger hunt to see what I read next. So I am using the same prompts as before, but obviously last time I did this was a little while ago, so I have read new books, so the books I choose to fulfill these prompts might be different. So each prompt will lead me to another book, which leads me to another book until we get to the final prompt, which will lead me to my TBR and the book I'm going to read next. We have my shelves here. I don't have the best angles to film from in this room, so we're gonna have to make do. My room is also a bit of a mess. I'm packing to go away for the weekend. So let's see what we have. So prompt 1 is to grab your favourite book, go to the acknowledgements, and the first name you see, find a book by an author with the same name. What is my favourite book? I don't know. I might just have to pick a book I really like. I really liked A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and I've loved it for years, and I've loved the series, so I'm gonna choose this one. So going to the acknowledgements, and the first name I see, Sam Copeland. I don't know if I have anything by a Sam. This is also where things can get difficult because I mainly have women on my shelves, so I don't actually know if I have anything by a Sam. I can look for a Samantha, maybe, but again, don't know that I have anything. We may have fallen at the first hurdle here, but this will also annoy me if I move on to a different prompt and then remember something at another point, because that could very well happen, to be honest. I really can't think of anything by a Sam. No, we might just have to pick another name. Sarah Levinson. I have something by a Sarah Hawley, so let's do that. So Sarah Hawley, pick something on the cover and find another book with the thing in the title. Okay, we've got a witch, we've got a demon, we've got flowers. Okay, I'm gonna go with the witch and pick The Wedding Witch by Erin Sterling. Go to page 50, line 5, pick a word from that line and find a title with that word. Page 50, line 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, wine in its glass. I might have to go with in or its, because wine and glass is difficult. I'm even struggling to find in or its. I might have to go into, just look at my TBR and see what I have there. Instead of going into the other room that has like my TBR shelves in it, and found there are rivers in the sky. So wine in its glass, there are rivers in the sky. Find a 5-star read with the same colours on the cover. Now this is where I ran into a hitch last time, because I'm such a picky reader. I don't have a ton of 5-star reads. So I'm looking for things that are white, blue, or gold. Now, because I have so few 5 stars, I think last time I also just went for like ones that were like 4.5 stars also. So I think I'm gonna go for Sister Song, because this is blue, white and gold, this is blue, white and gold. Different shades of blue slightly, but it's literally got all the aspects apart from that little orange. So that's my highly rated read. with the same colours on the cover. So now I need to find a book with the same number of pages as this. Gosh, okay. I'm looking for a book with 404 pages. 404. Okay, let's see what is like a similar size. Bandit Queens is a similar size. 399, it's close. That is very close. What about Darling and the Duke? No, 367. Okay. I mean, Bandit Queens is the closest we've got so far. If I include the acknowledgements, it takes it up to 406. So 404 or 406. Now, I sort of don't want to go for any of my Greek mythology because I don't know that I have any authors with similar names. I don't want to go fantasy because, again, we don't want to go for something with a difficult name. I remember finding this prompt tricky last time as well, which is annoying. I might again have to venture into the TBR room and see what I can find there that has a book with 404 or 406 pages. I will be back. Okay, I've gone for the cloisters because with the additional content and the acknowledgements and the questions in the back, that is 2, 3, 4, 5, 406 pages. So let's do that. Flip open to any page. The first name you see, find a book by an author who shares that name. First name I see, Patrick. Okay, that is a man's name. This is where we have problems. I have George. I have Andy. I have an Andrew. I have a William. Patrick Rothfuss. I have a Patrick Rothfuss on my TBR. I can't be bothered to go get it. So we'll just say that. So Patrick Rothfuss has the same name as Patrick in this book. So find another title with the same number of letters. Okay, so Patrick Rothfuss' book is called The Name of the Wind. TheNameofthe name of the WIND. So 16 letters. 16 letters, right? The name of the wind. 16 letters. Okay. Let's look at Project Hail Mary. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so I'm going to be kidding. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, actually, I've just had a thought and I'm going to see if this works because this will make the next prompt easy for me. Okay, I'm going to go with Never Seduce a Scot. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So that means that I'm using Never Seduce a Scot, this romance clinch cover, to find a book with a similar cover. And I can do that fairly easily because I can pick When a Scot Ties the Knot. So we have the tartan, we have them both in an embrace. I feel like I've cheated because I've gone for something that I knew I could definitely match up with, but there we go. So now I'm using When a Scot Ties the Knot. Flip to a random page point at a word and find that word in a book title on your TBR shelf. Okay, so we are gonna go into the room with all my TBR books. So scene change. Now this is the part where you can stand for ages just going through words. So we're using when a Scot ties the knot. And it's like you either want something so generic like you, me, the, to make it easier, or you want to like hope against hope that your finger lands on something that's like a word you know, but that's not super common, but like also an interesting enough word that like it's on a very specific book title, you know? So here we go. Way. Don't think I have anything. How. How? How? I'm thinking like this is how you lose the time war. I don't own that though. How to kill a guy in 10 dates is one that's around at the moment, but again, I don't own it. Wait, actually, how beautiful we were. I think this is the only one I have with how. So this, like, I don't have options. This just has to be it. This does sound interesting. It's been on my TBR for a long time. It was my sister's, but it like just wasn't really her thing, so she gave it to me. I love the cover. It's so bold and colourful. But this does sound very interesting to me. It says, set in the fictional African village of Kusawa, this is the story of a people living in fear amidst environmental degradation wrought by an American oil company. Pipeline spills have rendered farmlands infertile. Children are dying from drinking toxic water. Promises of cleanup and financial reparations are made and broken. Left with few choices, the people of Kusawa decide to fight back, but it will come at a steep price, one which generation after generation will have to pay. How Beautiful We Were is a masterful exploration of what happens when the reckless drive for profit, coupled with the ghost of colonialism, comes up against one community's determination to hold on to its ancestral land and a young woman's willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of her people's freedom. This sounds really interesting. I have been like trying to read more about like environmentalism and stuff over the past few years. I definitely feel like I've got more into that, and this sounds like it could be really interesting. And I love following like young female characters. So yeah, and this is an interesting one to have for this vlog because it's one that I've always been interested in, but it's never like fallen well into like a potential video idea. So it's one that's just sat on my shelves for a long time, and I think would continue to sit on my shelves for a long time because I don't want to unhaul it without reading it because it does sound interesting to me, but it's not one that like really jumps out at me either. So it's like a very sort of in between book for me. I want to read it, but it's not one that I'm fussed about reading like anytime soon in the immediate future. So it just sits on my shelves and has sat on my shelves for a while. So I'm hoping I like this. But it's also one in that case that I don't have like a ton of emotional attachment to. So like if I don't like it, I don't really have qualms about like getting rid of it. But if I do like it, it will be a really pleasant like surprise, and I'll be very happy that I finally got around to reading it. So this is actually a really interesting pick for this vlog. It's one that I occasionally think about suggesting and putting forward as an option for my book club because it I think has some themes that like we read a lot about. We like books around like young women and like community we read a lot about, and we've read some books that have like environmental issues or like interesting backdrops to do with that kind of thing. And so I've always thought like, should I put this forward as a suggestion. Maybe I will put it forward now for our next meetup so that I have like double purpose for reading this book, for the vlog and for my book club. And just like hope it gets chosen as an option, because it does sound like the kind of thing my book club would enjoy. And also because this sounds like quite intense and like there's going to be a lot going on, I think it's the kind of book that I would like to discuss with someone and like get their ideas and their perspectives. So I think I might do that. So we're going to read How Beautiful We Were by Mbolo Mbu. Exciting. So I've been reading How Beautiful We Were. It's currently gorgeous weather at the moment, really warm, very sunny. So I've come to like the field near my house to sit and read outside. So I've got a little set up here and I've just been reading in the shade because it is a bit warm in direct sunshine. But yeah, I'm around page 80 and I'm liking the book. We've been like flitting between two sort of perspectives. So we have this collective perspective of the children, which is just from the point of view of like the children as a whole living in this village. And then we also have the perspective of one specific young girl whose father went to meet the company who have been like drilling for oil and stuff in and around the village. And he and some of the other men from the village who went to speak to the Pexton company never came back, and they don't know what happened to them. And like the company are saying they saw them and then they left, and so if they didn't come back to the village, they have no idea where they are. And they're sort of trying to find out what happened, and the people remaining in the village are now months later starting to somewhat take action against Pexton Company. So that's interesting. And yeah, we're flitting between her point of view and then like a collective child point of view, getting a perspective on the village, a bit of like background on the village and the different interesting characters who live there, and how like the village and the surrounding areas are set up, and like the class differences between certain characters and certain areas, which is interesting to read about, and how like a lot of people in the village, a lot of the children especially, are getting very sick from drinking water, and how the big river is contaminated and they can't like fish or hunt there anymore. So basically we've just had a lot of setup and sort of background for how this company came to the village, and how that and like the oil and the water is affecting the cleanliness, the healthiness of everyone in and around the village. So yes, I'm interested. I'm sort of now potentially waiting for like something else to happen, like another big moment. They have like I said, taken action, but I'm waiting for something to come of that, because what they've decided to do as a village is risky, I would say. It's a bold move that they've made, or that like one guy in the village made, and they've all decided to like back up. So we will see what happens because of that. But I'm enjoying it so far. It's reading like fairly easily, and so I'm getting through it, which is nice. But I will update you when I'm a bit further in, when something else has happened. But I'm liking it so far, and I'm glad I've like finally got round to reading this. Things are really kicking off in here with like a lot going wrong. Obviously, like we had the whole water environmental situation in the village anyway, but the village have made some choices and things have not played out well for them in some respects. In other respects, they are maybe seeing some change start to happen, but it's sort of like, how hopeful can they be, or the help that they're being given, how easy is it to take that help. I do like the way this is written, because obviously we have like the interspersions of the chapters that are from the perspective of the children, like as a whole. And we've had Thula's uncle. I'm currently on a chapter from the perspective of Thula's mother, and from flipping ahead a little bit to see like how long a chapter was, I know that we're going to get Thula's gran as a perspective, and having it that way is really interesting because we see the different like thoughts and opinions about what's happening from different characters' perspective and their different interpretations on things. But also we just get like a bigger, broader idea of like the village and this family, and we get to learn a lot about like characters who aren't even necessarily in the story currently, but we have all these people who knew them, so we're finding out about all their relationships and their lives generally. And so I do like the way it's written. So I'm about halfway through now, so I'll update you when I get a bit further through and like something else of note happens or we change to another perspective. So yeah, but I am liking it. So after like 2 weeks, I finally finished reading How Beautiful We Were by Mbolo Mbu. This was such an interesting, thought-provoking book. I really wish I'd read this with my book club. After picking it for the scavenger hunt, I nominated it to be our next book club read in the hopes that it would get chosen so I could read it for like a video purpose and a real life purpose. But it didn't get chosen, and I'm really sad about that, having finished it, because I think I could have such interesting discussions with people about this book. There's so much going on here with all the different perspectives, creating this like through narrative of this village and Thula, our main character. You could have such an interesting conversation about the perspectives that the characters take, because like even within the story, like Thula changes her perspective because she is fed up of like passively waiting for something to happen in the village for Pexton to do the right thing when it's not happening, and she's like, we've got to take action. But then when the action taken is turning violent, she is like, no, we need to approach this through peace. Whereas the perspective of the children takes that more violent, aggressive turn. And yeah, I think you could have a great discussion over like, I don't know how much one or the other is morally or ethically right, and does that actually, do those questions come into play when you're dealing with a crisis like this? And then is that sort of thing okay on the level of like going against a big company, but then their violence becomes more centered on like specific people, and even against like Thula herself. There's like a moment that happens towards the end that was quite upsetting. Something is done to Thula in sort of a view of it being for a greater good, for a purpose, but actually it's just something like very horrific and violating on a personal level. And so I think you could, have so many interesting in-depth discussions of all the different characters' perspectives and different characters' relationships to each other, because the whole time the children are like, we respect Dula so much, she is like the best of us, and yet they do use her in this horrible way. I think one of my favourite character dynamics in here is between Sahel, who is Thula's mother, and then Thula's Yaya, who is her dad's mother. So Thula's mother and her mother's mother-in-law, because I think they have such a loving, lovely relationship. I think a lot in like fiction, people go like, oh, like wives and mother-in-laws, it's a complicated dynamic and it's not always like presented in the best way, but in here they just have so much love and respect and care for each other, and they want the best for each other. And Thula's mother will like look after her mother-in-law with such care and comfort, but her Yaya just like wants what's best for the family and is like, yes, you've got to think about your kids, but like I also want you to think about you and like what's best for you and your family as a whole, and like you can marry another man and that's okay, that doesn't disregard your feelings for my son and stuff like that. And I just really loved that relationship. I think the whole way through it's so interesting to see all the different character dynamics of these people in the village and like focusing on Thula's family. I think one slight issue with the book is that because we flip between all these different perspectives and we get the perspectives from each character on like a chunk of time each time, that it does sort of chronologically flip back and forward a bit, in that in one chapter someone will be talking about something that happens, like someone coming to the village, and then they're like, and 3 years later this thing happened, and then 5 years after Pexton did this we found out about this. But then in the next person's perspective they'll be like, so 2 years after Pexton did this thing is when this thing happened, and it's like, okay, so that was after Pexton did that thing, but before the thing that happened 5 years after Pexton did that. And so sometimes I did have to sort of work out in my head like, okay, what happened in each order, and was that when Thula was there, or was she in America at that point, and what but it didn't get too confusing, and I was just sort of along for the ride. But it's such an interesting way to tell this story, and I do think in a way, because you're flitting between characters and between timings and stuff, it does just like sweep you up in this story of this whole village, and it feels like very I don't even know the word, I don't even know how to describe it. It like just gives you this like larger sense of this whole community at once, and all these things happening over such a long period of time, but also it is just within people's lifetimes. You can go, oh, it happened over years, but it is again like one person's life, like Thula's life is defined by this thing that happened and like has happened in the past, because we get backstory from like older characters and is going to continue to happen in the future. And I will say this is not like a hopeful story. If you're thinking of going into this and it'll be like, oh, this big environmental problem, but then like the village and the good guys win and they overcome the bad guys completely and that's not what this is. and I think this takes a much more realistic view on these like environmental issues around obviously like colonialism, and yeah, it's quite a tough read in points, but also like I think just like really makes you reckon with what is going on in the world with environmental issues, and like American and European countries going into other countries to exploit their resources and like creating loopholes in contracts so they can get away with certain things, or not actually properly explaining what they're doing in the first place, and then using like the governments of these countries to cover their tracks, and then using the courts in their own countries to like just get around whatever they can. So it's like very angering to read, but great. I'm really glad I finally got to this because of the scavenger hunt, because although this has always sounded interesting to me and I've always wanted to read it, it is very much one that has sat on my shelves for ages and could have sat on my shelves for even longer, because I know it's like a heavy topic. I've never quite had that impetus to like pick it up when I'm like, oh, I'm just mood reading, what do I want to read? I'm never like, I'm in the mood to read a fairly harrowing story of like a village's collapse because of environmental and capitalist issues, you know. But I'm glad I finally got around to reading it. I would say if this sounds interesting to you and you're in a book club, I think this would be a really great book club read. I'm going to try and convince some of the women in my book club to read it just like in their own time, so I have someone to talk to about it, because I think, yeah, you could have some great discussions about this and all the different characters and their, yeah, perspectives and opinions on stuff. I think you could, yeah, generate some really interesting thoughts, etc. So have you read this? Do let me know in the comments, because I would love to hear other people's thoughts on this, because no one I know in real life, in person, has read this, and I want to talk about it. So do let me know in the comments below. Are you interested in reading this book? Because I would recommend it if you're into like fiction books about the environment and like capitalism and stuff. Like I said, it's not a hopeful, happy read, but I do think it's very interesting in a very like centered, focused way, where we do get like bigger picture conversations, but we are like really honed in on this one village, one family in particular. I think that's such like an interesting narrative way to explore these themes. That is it for this scavenger hunt chooses what I read next, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye!